Lydia has joined us many times. She's a registered dietitian out of Chicago, and she is a marathoner as well. I have not purposefully not asked her anything about her racing yet because I always want to hear an update, and I'm sure everyone else does too. So Lydia's been wonderful. I think this is your fourth time joining us.
Yeah.
And just sharing information. I know a few people work with you one-on-one on the team, but generally just all of the team has good things that they kind of take and glean from your expertise, whether they know it or not, because most of the things I tell them too are just stuff that I have texted you and asked you. So you're our wealth of information when it comes to nutrition. But yeah, please tell me how things are going. How's training? How's life?
Yeah. So, well, it's great to be back. As always a great group to come talk to. But yeah, life is good. I just completed the grandma's half marathon 2 weeks ago now. It would have been weekends ago. Had pretty nice weather for that one. I was leaving Chicago at the time where it was 91 degrees, which is nothing compared to 160, so I shouldn't even complain. But it was 91 degrees in Chicago and went to about 55 degrees in like the tip of Minnesota. So it was near perfect conditions for a half marathon, and was able to have a well-executed race in terms of running a race from a negative split standpoint. I'm slowly still coming back from an injury I had in December, January, and part of February. So that's always good to kind of feel confidence coming out of a well-executed race and feel good after that. And now I'm training for Chicago Marathon. So that'll be in October. So the fun of training throughout the summer, which any of you who have fall races or late summer races know that fun that is summertime training. And hopefully today's discussion will help all of us who are training in the summertime in the heat and the humidity that we may experience at some point of our training plan in the summer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a couple people will probably be joining you at Chicago. So maybe we'll be able to do a little meetup there.
Yeah. Is anyone here running Chicago?
So Shelby is, but she has not joined.
Okay.
And then there's a couple people on the fence about it that are in, but two people that are in but haven't technically committed yet. We're kind of feeling things out. So we'll see. We'll definitely put together an event if there's more than like 2 or 3. And then there's a chance that I might come out just to like cheer people on and stuff, depending on how things go. But
it's a great one to cheer. So even if you're not running, it's a great one to come to.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to just let you take it. I'm super excited to hear all the stuff you're going to give us ideas about today.
Awesome. Well, let me go ahead and was it going to let me present here? Let's see here. I want to do this. Oh, wait. There we go. Okay, let's see if this works. It just asked me if I wanted permission to do this, so hopefully I can do this. Screen, window. Okay, cancel. Okay. This may be. Bear with me here. Okay, I'm going to do share the full screen. You all are going to see yourself for a quick second. Dismiss. And then, see. Did that work? Can you guys see the presentation? Or do you just see yourselves?
I can see a black screen.
Oh, no. Okay.
It says you're presenting, but...
It says I'm presenting, but it's not. Okay. Hide.
Can you present a tab?
Let me see if it'll let me. Stop presenting. Look at entire screen. Oh, okay. Here, maybe it'll be. I tried to do a tab. Let me select a tab to share.
Sometimes I pull out a window, and that helps too.
Okay, let me try. Share screen. Okay, it does not like me. It's actually on my computer, so that's where I think maybe the issue is. 1 second here, guys. I apologize. Let me go into Google Drive. Load.
If you need me to, I can always present it and just, click over as we're following along.
Yeah, well, I did it I did it on my computer, and of course it's now, here we go. Let's see if this will work. Of course now it won't let me share from my computer. I has to share from Chrome specifically. So real quick here, bear with me guys. Sorry about this. Usually I'm way better prepared for this kind of stuff, and it's just one of those days, right? One of those days.
Exactly. I was going to say, chalk it up to being a little potentially overheated during your run today.
Exactly. Okay. I'm going to do version 2. Why is it not? Dang it. Okay. I want to, shoot. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know why it's not letting me upload it to, I might just have to go based off of voice and maybe present a few things. It just, for some reason, it won't let me upload the presentation to the drive. I don't know why it won't let me, because that's the only way it will let me present. It won't let me to present my whole screen. Let me see.
Do you want to send it to me and you can start presenting and I can load it on my end and then pop it up when?
Yeah, we can try that. I have it in a PowerPoint file. Let's see if that'll work. Let me see here. No.
Yeah. Orly's wondering what happens when you try to present your screen, but she tried that a second ago and it just showed a black.
Because like let's try to see it.
Window.
Oh, that's just window, entire screen. So I tried to do the entire screen. It says I can't do the entire screen. I don't know why. This has literally never happened to me before. I do not understand what's going on. I'll send it to you right now.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. So today we are going to talk about hydration and electrolytes. And I know that today is, you guys have some of your tests that you did, the sweat test. So we'll talk about that. I don't know what's going on here. Can I send it to you in Keynote? I don't know why it's not going in PowerPoint.
I cannot get it in Keynote. I can get it in Dropbox or Google Drive or email.
I'm doing it. Okay, PowerPoint. Okay, let's try this. Let me see one more time. Let me try one more thing. We're going to talk about hydration and electrolytes here.
Could you convert the PDF to Google Slides?
I did, and it wasn't letting me. I think I might have found it, maybe. Let's see here. It's finishing upload.
We have some.
Boom, I got it. Okay.
Oh, never mind.
1 second. I think I got it. Let's. Okay. Can you guys see that? Yay! Only took me, anyone taking a amount of time it took me to do that?
I think it's about 4 minutes.
There we go. Okay. That was a gracious amount of time. But we're going to talk about, let me get it to, well, now I have it presenting, but, oh, there we go. Okay. We're going to do a slideshow. Okay, awesome. We can all see this, right? In the presentation format?
We are good.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to talk about hydration for endurance athletes like you guys. And just so everybody knows too, with hydration, when I'm using that term, and generally speaking, when anyone's using that term of hydration, we're not just talking about fluids. We're talking about water and electrolytes. And so we're going to talk about fluid needs for you. And we're also going to talk about electrolyte needs and what are electrolytes. So some of the stuff you may already know if you've been in the running community for a long period of time. Some of this might new information. We're going to go through all of those details of your fluid and water needs, as well as what electrolytes are and how to make sure you're getting enough of those in your day-to-day in addition to your in-run. And then we'll talk about analyzing your specific Gatorade tests. So first and foremost, hydration is very important. I always, whenever I'm talking to people, and you guys might remember this from past presentations, but when I'm talking about macronutrients, I'm not just talking about carbs, proteins, fats. Those are macronutrients, but there is a fourth, and it is fluid. And it's because 60% of your body is made up of fluid. So we need a good amount of fluid in a large amount, hence the macronutrient, because we don't actually have a water reservoir in our body for storage. So it's important that we're replacing fluids daily. I think that's something we oftentimes don't realize is like, oh, our body is 60% water. So, I have, some to spare if I'm sweating a lot when I'm out there. But, the idea is that we don't have that reservoir. We need to replenish every single day. And so it's important that we make sure that we're maintaining a good amount of fluid on a daily basis. It's also important to stay hydrated because it helps maintain your body temperature. A couple people may have experienced this at some point in their life. I'm going to raise my hand. I have, where I have been dehydrated on a run or during a race, and my core body temperature raises. It does that because you're dehydrated. If you're not well hydrated, you are going to overheat, which then is just going to start to crumble down your stride, your strength, your mental capacity as well. So that's one of the main reasons too to stay really well hydrated is to maintain your core body temperature. It's also really important for digestion, absorption, and removal of waste products. So removal of waste products, a lot of people probably kind of understand, like being well hydrated means that your kidneys function really well and that you could remove waste. But what oftentimes people don't realize is that essential piece of hydration for digestion. So we'll get into this a little bit more later, but when you are if you're experiencing any GI issues during runs, everyone is always so quick to jump to, oh, it's my gel. Oh, it's my in-run fuel. Oftentimes, more often than not, it actually can be linked to dehydration. You're not hydrated enough because it's essential to be hydrated when you are digesting, whether it be in your day-to-day digestion or it be in-run digestion. So being able to digest and then also absorb nutrients, being hydrated is important for that. It also helps with transporting nutrients and other body substances throughout the body. So, your blood, the more hydrated you are, your blood is going to be able to move a little bit better throughout your body to deliver the oxygen that it needs. And then also just preventing dehydration. Very basic, but very important at the same time. This is a really important table to kind of keep in mind when you're talking about activity, running, talking about your hydration timing. So for every day, there's kind of two rules of thumb when we talk about hydration for every day. You can be either this recommendation of drink roughly 1 milliliter for every calorie you consume. If you track calories, this is kind of easy to kind of pay attention to. I am not one of those people that tracks calories, so it might be a little bit harder to kind of determine. So the other recommendation for everyday hydration is to take half your body weight, and that's the amount of fluid ounces. So if you're 120 pounds, then your hydration daily is going to be roughly around 60 fluid ounces per day. And that's the everyday. That's not including if you're active or those sorts of things. That's just your everyday recommendation. There becomes more recommendations or higher levels if you're more active, it's a long run, more hot, humid, all of those details. But we'll get into that. Next is if it's 2 to 3 hours before a training run or before a race, you want to try to consume around 17 fluid ounces. I know it sounds like a really specific kind of odd number, but it's really kind of in that range of anywhere from 16 to 18 fluid ounces with 17 kind of just being there in the middle. Immediately prior to an actual run or a race, you want to try to consume 6 to 12 fluid ounces. So this is like, 15 minutes before, 5 minutes before. That's a good rule of thumb to just kind of get in a little last minute fluid before going out on that run. And then every 15 to 20 minutes during an actual run or potentially during a race, trying to get 6 to 12 fluid ounces. And as you can see here, that next recommendation is exercising any longer than 60 minutes. You want to also include a carbohydrate source in there. A lot of times the reason I have this in the hydration timing is because we're not just looking at your hydration fluid needs, but if you're out there for longer than an hour, including some form of carbohydrate or energy source can also be able to provide you with energy, but also some electrolytes. So a lot of sports drinks will have anywhere from 400 milligrams of sodium, anywhere upwards of 1,000 milligrams of sodium in a 600 to 1,200 milliliter fluid amount of sports drink. So that could be Gatorade and some other products as well, which we'll get into a little bit more in a minute here. When you're done with exercise, and this is oftentimes one of the areas that a lot of runners might overlook, they're really focused on that recovery with the protein, the carbohydrates, but the other piece of rehydration and refuel is actually the electrolytes with the fluid. So for every pound you lose when you're out there running, or whatever activity it is, if you're cross training, this still counts. It's about 24 fluid ounces for every pound you lose. So some people can lose upwards of 5 pounds when they're out there running. And so that's a lot of fluid to retake in. So that's why I always tell runners, when you are rehydrating after especially a long run or a quality session, or just a really hot, humid run, even if it was like a zone 2 or nice, easy run, you still want to, if you come back and you look like you just jumped into a pool or into a lake, you probably lost at least a pound, if not a little bit more of fluid. And so making sure you're rehydrating for the next 2 to 3 hours, making that a priority, because that's going to help your appetite get back. It's going to help you avoid further damage to your muscles. So that rehydration becomes really important after the fact. Hydrate. So when you're not hydrated, your strength and your endurance will actually decrease. So this is something we see very, very commonly. Performance can decline with as little as 2 to 3% decrease in your body weight from sweat. Very small percentage can make such a large impact. You might feel this in a race. It might experience where you feel like you're pushing, your heart rate is really high, you feel like you're really you're pushing but you're not going forward, your legs feel heavy. These are the more like common symptoms that people can experience. The more extreme symptoms are heat stroke, cramping, and obviously the big one, potential of death if you do overheat from dehydration. Other more common ones you may experience if you are dehydrated during a run or a race is nausea and vomiting. Like I said, sometimes that's just, if you're dehydrated, you're experiencing some nausea. Could be the fact that you're just dehydrated there. Headaches too. This could be headaches during an actual run or headaches later on in your day. And then also just a general feeling of fatigue. Now, we all, in whatever distance we run, we all experience some form of fatigue, but we as runners are fairly intuitive, and we know the difference between like training fatigue and like I can't really function fatigue. Training fatigue is slightly normal. We got to adapt to it. I think Ashley would agree with me on this one. But we never want to be so fatigued and tired that we can't function the rest of our day. Most of us here, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, most of us here are not professional athletes. We still have to function and work throughout the rest of our day. We have lives, we have families, we have things we have to do. So we never want to feel that very extreme sense of fatigue. This can usually be experienced like after a long run, for example. If you're finishing long runs and you're feeling like you need to nap significantly, like after every single long run, or after really all runs, then maybe that's one of many signs that maybe you're dehydrated. There could be quite a few other reasons, but potential dehydration could be a big factor there. Moving on to electrolytes. So what are electrolytes? It's a kind of a buzzword I feel like we use a lot of times in sports nutrition, but they're actually minerals within our bodies that actually have an electrical charge. They actually benefit our body in a lot of ways. And the main ones when we're talking about electrolytes, we're talking about these 5: sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, chloride, and actually phosphate is in there as well, but it's not one we talk about super like a lot because we don't lose a lot of phosphate in our actual sweat, whereas we lose those top 5 more frequently. What do they actually do in our body? Like, okay, they have an electrical charge. That's cool. What does that mean? Well, they actually regulate our body's function, such as muscle and nerve function, and then our heart rhythm, our blood pressure. So that's why a lot of times if any of you either have high blood pressure or you know someone that has high blood pressure, when someone is usually diagnosed with high blood pressure, they're usually told to back off on the sodium. They're also told to kind of keep an eye on their potassium levels. That's because sodium and potassium need to be at an equilibrium to be able to help with balancing of their blood and their blood pressure, and then also helps with the muscle contraction and relaxation of any muscle in the body, but specifically the heart. So that's why also too, for a healthy heart rhythm and everything, having a good balance of sodium and potassium becomes very vital for your overall health, but especially too as an endurance athlete. Electrolytes also help with regulating digestion and actually that fluid balance in the body. So I was just talking to an athlete earlier today who's great on hydration. He says like, oh, I drink ton of fluids. I drink, almost over like 150 to 200 ounces of water a day. And, that dove into a discussion of like, there's such a thing as overhydration. That fluid balance is not there because just drinking water can actually dilute those electrolytes that are essential for balancing that fluid. So kind of just drinking all that water and it's going right through them. It's not actually absorbing any of it. So that's where we balance. Okay, we're drinking lots of fluid. That's great, but let's adjust. Let's make sure we've got those electrolytes because that's true hydration. It's not just fluid. Why do we pay attention to electrolytes in our day-to-day intake and our fluids? Because if we have low electrolyte levels, and this can be for any of these key electrolytes, it can cause an irregular heart rate or heartbeat, can cause a fast heart rate, which obviously uses more energy too, cause fatigue, lethargy, convulsions or seizures for some individuals, because think about the controlling of the muscles, allowing for function of those muscles. It can cause nausea and vomiting, and also diarrhea and or constipation. So this is why electrolytes are important. This is why, especially with new runners, oftentimes they're just drinking lots of water. They don't think about those electrolyte piece because that electrolytes are not talked about a ton. It's definitely a trend nowadays. You might see it on all over social media and stuff like that. Like hydration, electrolytes is a trend actually for 2024 across the board, not just with runners to talk about. But this is why it's important to make sure we have enough electrolytes. Now, I'm always a big person and proponent of like get it from our food first if we can. And electrolytes are not something that we can only get from supplements. We can get electrolytes from our food very easily. So if you're somebody who's like, hey, like I don't really want to spend lots of money on electrolyte supplementation, that's fine. You can incorporate getting your plenty of these electrolytes from your food. Sodium, usually a pretty easy one these days, but some common ones you can get it from is broth. A lot of people do like bone broth or things like that to help with electrolyte replenishment. Eating bacon, salting your foods, even getting it from spinach, fish, pickles, pickle juice, Pickles and pickle juice are super popular right now. I know even in our household, we get pickles, and then my husband loves pickles and uses that as his electrolyte replenishment. And we actually strain the brine once the pickles are all done and strain all the extra stuff and use that as like his pickle juice replenishment for electrolytes. So you can definitely use pickles and pickle juice to be able to get those sodium needs in. The other is potassium. Potassium you can get from dark leafy greens, from avocado, nuts, salmon, mushrooms, and bananas. Bananas are probably the one most people know, and also potatoes and that as well. Third, and probably like the third most important, I would say, magnesium. You can get this from dark chocolate, avocado, almonds, artichoke, spinach, and fish. As you can see, fish is actually in all three of those. Hint, hint. If you do like fish, it is a great way to help with electrolyte, either electrolyte loading or replenishment of electrolytes. And all the others, when we're talking about um, the others like chloride and even some of these other ones above it, but you can get it from watermelon, oranges, cucumbers, tart cherries, beets, strawberries, celery, mango, and lemon. And then obviously one of those electrolytes that we lose that I mentioned, let me just go up here, calcium. You know, if we're talking about calcium here, that would obviously be in your dark leafy greens. It would also be in some dairy products. So replenishing calcium is also very important. And the reason that it is so important is we obviously want to pay attention to bone density for now because we want to avoid it later on in life. And so if you're a heavier sweater, this is why replenishing all electrolytes, not just those top three, but all of them, becomes really important. So paying attention to your calcium intake is important as a runner to make sure that you're not losing calcium from your bones because you're a heavier sweater and you're not replenishing. So just keeping that in mind as well. If you want to use supplementations for electrolyte replenishment, then some of the common ones, now there's so many out there, and they keep coming out with new ones, I swear. But really the key ones that I've one, tried myself, and two, usually most runners and athletes have really good success with. The common ones are Noon Hydration, Gatorade, which also has carbohydrates in it, so also additional energy. Scratch Labs, which also has carbohydrates, but they also now have one that does not have carbs. It's just a daily hydration. So that's a great option as well if you're looking for just that day-to-day hydration. There's Salt Stick, which are usually salt capsules or pills or chewable. And the great thing about Salt Stick, and I'll highlight them because it's really great for runners for the sole fact that it has not only sodium, potassium, and magnesium, but it also does have calcium and chloride in there as well. So it does have all top 5 in salt stick products. So that's one really great thing. Next is base salt. This one is a little bit more common in triathletes actually. And it's basically like salt crystals that are been formulated specifically to have like potassium in them and also magnesium. So that's another product. Tailwind, which also has some carbohydrates in it as well. And then Element or Element-T. This is one that's pretty big these days. It's a high level of sodium. It's about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per serving, but it also, what's great once again of it is it does have potassium and magnesium. It has a good amount of magnesium in it. So for those of you who might be heavier sweaters or higher concentration of sweat and sodium, then that could be a good product to incorporate into your day-to-day. So these are the things that we kind of talked about, things that can happen if you do have lower electrolytes. You know, your regular heartbeat, your fast heart rate, fatigue, convulsions, seizures, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation. So things that we may contribute to other factors, maybe something we ate, maybe something, something we took in during the run, it might not actually be our electrolytes. It might be something we need to pay attention to there. So now talking about individual sodium needs. Why do you actually need to know your individual sodium needs or your individual sweat needs? Well, the main reason is because in 1 pound of sweat, an individual could lose anywhere from 400 to 800 milligrams of sodium, or 100 to 200 milligrams of potassium, or 10 to 20 milligrams of calcium or 5 to 20 milligrams of magnesium. It's a really large range for each of those electrolytes. And so we wanted to be able to try to get more pinpointed with your needs, because that helps you kind of game plan your long runs or your key crucial quality runs, as well as also help with making sure you're getting your fluid needs in addition. Because yeah, we can look at this range and we can eyeball it, we can estimate it, but when we have technology to be able to pinpoint a little bit better, then we avoid the chance of nausea, vomiting, and any sort of diarrhea or anything like that. We're able to avoid those things in our runs and in our races. So that's why we do it. Another key factor too is to know not just the sodium needs, but also your fluid needs. Why we did the Gatorade Sweat Test is also too because you can actually lose iron through your sweat. So if you find out that you are a heavy fluid loss, then might be a higher likelihood, both male and female, that you might need to consider looking at your iron levels on a regular basis to make sure that they're not getting significantly low, looking at your ferritin levels. Because if you're a heavier sweater, you're at higher risk of having low iron, being anemic, and the things like that. So that's another reason why I recommend always doing a sweat test whenever someone is working on their in-run nutrition. Okay. Now, you all got the test. You all did all of the math. You did all of the app and everything. This here is literally if you were to not have the Gatorade app, if you were not to have the patch, this is how we did it in school back in the day for myself, when we would figure out someone's sweat rate and their fluid losses and everything. So if you wanted to do the math yourself, you could get to know what your pre-run weight is, your post-run weight. You'd figure out what your fluid consumption was, and then the amount of time you were actually running. So you would take that pre-run weight, you would subtract the post-run weight, and you find out how much weight loss there was. And then you would convert to fluid loss. You would multiply that by 16. And then this amount here, that would be your total fluid loss plus fluid consumed. So you're trying to find that total amount. And then you would divide this quantity here by the time during workout. Now, this is a really super complicated math, but this is literally how we used to do it back in the day. So it is, once I found the Gatorade app and this Gatorade sweat patch, it just made it way easier. And the great thing is this math doesn't give us the specifics. It gives us a range, but it doesn't give us the amount of sodium. And that is another crucial step that we need. So it's great to know this stuff, but at the same time, doing that individual sweat test becomes really important. So I wanted to highlight, I know we're going to talk about the Gatorade Sweat Patch today and your guys' results, but I also want to highlight some other options. The main reason that Asher and I talked about using the Gatorade Sweat Patch is because that it's the most cost effective, as you can see. Is it the gold standard across the board? No, not at all. I would not consider the Gatorade Sweat Patch to be the gold standard that everyone should be doing this and this is great. But I think it's the most cost effective for runners to use. Now, the other ones that are out there and available that you can have access to, whether you do it at home or you're actually going someplace and getting it done, are going to be the NYX hydration biosensor. This is one that oftentimes people have already. It's like a lime green little patch. You kind of wear it on your arm, or I think they mainly have it on your arm. Kind of looks like the continuous glucose monitor, but it's not. You may see people have this on runs. They're not reusable patches. So it's one of those things where the sensor is reusable, but you buy new patches every time. And this allows for kind of an AI, learn how much sweat you sweat, and gives you more precise, kind of does all the math and all the recommendations for you in the app and in their system. So that's one option that you can always look at if you want to get further details. The Level-In Sweat Test is kind of one of those higher tested considered like a gold standard. I'd say that one is one of those high level gold standard ones that professional teams use, that collegiate athletes will use. So that's a high level one. You can buy it on Amazon if you want to do it yourself, but that's a high level one as well. A newer one that newer-ish, it's on its version 2, but another reusable biosensor is H-Drop. This one obviously is the most expensive, but you don't have to buy anything else after it. It's just you buy the one device. It's a little chunky looking. I've never tried it myself. I'm intrigued to try it, but I have never tried it myself. And it kind of looks like a iPod shuffle in a way, like the little iPod shuffles. And you kind of wear it on your arm, and it biosenses the amount of fluid loss, sodium, and it actually does potassium and other levels as well. So that's where it can kind of like, ooh, maybe with more research, this could be a really cool product to be able to use. And the last but not least is Precision Hydration. This is a company that has sweat tests. These are where you go in person, and it tells you your concentration of sodium needs. This is all over the country at different places. If you are interested in doing those tests, you can always look on Precision Hydration's website, and they have all the locations. And they're international as a company, but that's also another one to go and look at there. So I like to highlight all those just so you guys have an idea of what's out there. Like I said, there could be more out there that I just don't even know about, but these are the ones that I'm most familiar with, and that most other professionals, and whether being running professionals or medical professionals, use. So how many people did the sweat test, the sweat patch? Did everyone, almost everybody here do it? You can raise your hand. You can say, yep, thumbs up. Perfect. Okay. So we have a good amount of people that did do it, which is great. The great thing too is if you did get them, you had 2 in the pack, so you have an opportunity to do a second one if you need to. But if you've already done it, you kind of see here, this is that before when you did it, it's like clear, there's nothing really in it. And then hopefully it looked a little like this, where it was, had some orange in it. It doesn't have to be fully filled up by any means. Even I've had some people where it's only filled up to like here, it'll still read that, it'll still use that. So it's a really great option to use. So analyzing your actual sweat test. So everybody did the sweat test. Were they able to get it analyzed in the app and everything? Give me a thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Okay. Oh no, it didn't work. I'm seeing that more and more actually. And I don't keep reaching out to Gatorade and being like, what's going on here? Because this is not something. Yeah, okay. So if you did have 2, try to do it again. But you can definitely, yeah, Ryan, you guys can take the notes and then do this later. But the results come out, and they come out with this, this was my results here. So this was like an outdoor run. It asks you, all these details about your run, how long was it? What was the kind of temperature? Was it easy? Was it hard? It's asking you all this information because it's going to do the analysis in the app. So this is for an outdoor run that was easy. It was about 66 degrees when I did this. And it's kind of almost like this little card for myself. And I screenshot this and I have it in my phone. But it tells you the results of your sweat test are your sweat rate is a range of ounces per hour. And so for me, the 29 to 34 ounces per hour was moderate. That's a moderate sweat rate. And this is based off of what they determine as more moderate. Sometimes I override what they're saying in terms of a category, but that is what they're kind of saying there. The next thing too is like the sodium concentration that it'll give you. And like I said, that's the benefit of doing this versus doing all that math yourself. So the sodium concentration also gives you a range of 10 to 23 milligrams per ounce. So this is per ounce that you're losing. So you get this information, and this is really great. It tells me that I have a low concentration of sodium. This was really insightful for me. And as some of you may also have had some aha moments when you did your sweat test, because I'm a heavy sweater. I'm usually looked like I jumped into a pool or I jumped into Lake Michigan after I'm done on a hotter day. But what I was doing before doing sweat tests was I was just taking in a ton of fluid and a ton of electrolytes. So I was doing both very high amounts in both those categories. And I was still having some nausea here and there. I was trying to figure out what's going on. Is it because I changed my gel? What's going on? Then I did the sweat test and I was like, oh, I lose a lot of fluid, but I don't lose as high concentration of sodium. So when I finally lowered my sodium intake, but kept my fluid intake during my runs high, I felt 1,000 times better. I no longer had the nausea. I no longer had the feeling like I wanted to vomit when I was running or when I was done with running. It just made such a big difference. That's the key importance for this. So to know too, once you know that salt or that sweat rate and that sodium concentration, your actual hydration and sodium needs are where you're going to take this sweat rate, you're going to multiply it, very simply, multiply it by the sodium concentration to get your needs per hour per activity. So for this, you would be able to say that, okay, so that's 29 multiplied by 10. Well, that's only 290 milligrams of sodium per hour. Or on the high end of that, that could be 782. Now that's a really large range for mine. You know, if you think about it, 290, almost 300, upwards of 800 milligrams per hour. So in knowing that range, you want to be able to kind of look at, okay, if I know that's my range, if I'm looking at that, then what does that mean for my all day long application, basically? So with the range, the lower end means that maybe it's not as much of a hot or more humid run. Maybe it is truly like a zone 2 or a very easy run. That would be like my low end of that range. If I'm on the higher end of that range, so for me, closer to like that 800 milligrams of sodium per hour, then that means it's going to be a hot or a humid run, or hot or humid. You know, it could be high humidity, but a little bit cooler. I might still need to be closer to that higher end range of sodium. So if you're higher concentration of sodium, then you need to take in some sodium, most likely prior to a run. So some of you may have seen this in your results, like you did the math, maybe you're doing the math right now. But you could lose upwards of 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of sodium per hour. That's a lot of sodium. Do I think that people should be popping those sodium tablets or those pills, you know, to try to get close to 1,000 milligrams per hour while they're out there running? No, because that's just going to feel really difficult to do. So an actual application of this is try to load up on your electrolytes. So the same concept as carbohydrate loading applies to electrolytes. We can load up on those electrolytes. Yes, there's no storage of fluid, and we have to replenish that every day. There is a storage of electrolytes, so you can store up some electrolytes prior to actually those runs. So for those who have higher concentration losses of sodium, also means if you have a higher concentration of sodium loss, that also means you probably have a higher concentration loss of potassium, higher concentration loss of magnesium, and hence the rest of those electrolytes. So load up on those. What this could actually look like is going back to the element or the element T. That's 1,000 milligrams of sodium. And I personally can't really take that while I'm out there running. There are plenty of runners who can take that in while they're running, but I like to say Element or Element T is a great product for the night before or the morning before your run. It's loading up on those electrolytes. It's one less thing you have to carry with you. So load up on those electrolytes. Another way to make sure that if you have that higher concentration of sodium, that you can also choose fuel that has sodium in it. So a common situation I see is people who love Morton products and Morton gels. And I'm not here to say like Morton bad or anything like that, but if you are somebody who does have a higher concentration loss of sodium, Morton might not be the best option for you because Morton has little to no sodium in it. So unless you want to take in salt tabs in addition to taking your gels, so that's another thing you have to carry on you, then my recommendation is to find something very similar that has sodium in it. There's a lot of products now on the market because everyone's catching up to Morton and kind of making things kind of similar. Just go on the feed, you'll find those things there. And they have sometimes 200 milligrams of sodium per serving, per gel. Well, if you're a high concentration sodium loss and you're taking in a gel every 30 minutes, that's 400 milligrams of sodium right there in 1 hour without taking any additional supplements in, just taking your gels or just taking chews or anything like that. If you're somebody who does like the Cliff Blocks or something, then get the ones that have higher sodium in them if you have a higher concentration of sodium. This will make a world of difference in how you feel and how you feel during and then after your runs. Now, if you're a lower concentration of sodium, then you can take in the amount that you're needed during your actual run. You can also electrolyte load. Let's say you're on that lower end. So for me, maybe I am on, it's like cooler, it's not really that hot out. Okay, well, I'm only at 290, 300 milligrams per hour. Okay, well, I can load up so I don't have to really worry too much because my gels have 200 milligrams of sodium in them. So well, I'll load up on a little bit of electrolytes. Maybe I'll have a noon tablet before I go out on my run, get that 350 milligrams of sodium before I go out there, and then be able to get those other needs in there. So that's another way of applying this information, whether you're on the low end or the high end. Now, does that make sense to everyone? This is an opportunity where you can come off mute. You can ask me questions about the actual results that you got, or any of the things that I just kind of talked about.
I have a question if no one else
Yes.
does. So we have, oh, good. Let me actually pass it on to Ode, and then I'll come back if needed.
Okay, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, one thing I was curious, I mean, with these ranges here, like how much does, I mean, I assume the sweat rate changes depending on temperature or whatever conditions,
Yes.
but does the amount of salt that you lose changes based on conditions as well? Or is it like, this is like how salty your sweat is, and whether it's hot or not, it's still going to be as salty, it's just you're going to sweat more or less?
Yes, great question. You're on the right track with what you were saying there, that your fluid losses may be different if it is hotter. So like you see on mine, it says 66, Fahrenheit. If it was hotter, my range of fluid intake might be a little bit higher, but my concentration of sodium going to stay right within that similar range. Now, what's interesting too is this range for me is pretty close for the fluid amount. So if it's hotter, that range is probably going to go up a little bit more. But the sodium concentration is absolutely going to stay very similar. Might not be exactly the same, but it might look very similar. So good question. The sodium concentration is going to stay the same no matter what the temperature is. The amount of fluid loss will change though.
So for example, like if we find like a concentration of electrolyte that works for us, then it's just like, well, if it's like super hot or you're working really hard, you're going to drink more, but with the same concentration of in your drinks.
Yep, correct. Yep. Rachel.
So I actually took 2 tests because the first test I took actually said that there was 0 sodium concentration in my sweat, which seemed not correct.
Yes.
So then I took a second one that gave me a value of 13 to 26 milligrams. So given what you were just saying, should I just assume that the first one was wrong?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, unfortunately I've been seeing this more and more, even like with my athletes, is like they've been getting like this 0 concentration. And that's just not right. Like you don't lose 0 amounts of sodium when you're out there sweating. So yes, take the second test as your rule of thumb. And that's also too, like, your sodium concentration will stay the same. This kind of go back to the last question. Your sodium concentration will stay the same. But what I will say is how you adjust with this range is if it's not as warm or not as humid, you do the lower part of that concentration range. It's still the same range, but then you do the higher amount range when you are actually out there and it's hotter, it's humid. You're going to need more of the electrolyte. The concentration is still staying the same, but you're going to need more because you're losing more fluid. So
Okay,
that's where the amount stays the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, take that second one, Rachel. Yeah, you're welcome. Ryan.
Yeah, I guess related to that, I was going to ask about the fact that there is like a fairly big range. But in addition to that, I'm wondering from test to test, how much variation there is in the measurement of concentration as well in those tests.
Great question. So yeah, so once again, these are not the gold standard. So there's going to be oftentimes a fairly different range, I would say. Most of the time, like this is a fairly precise range that I got for this run versus when I've done tests that have been, or I've had athletes that have done tests in higher heat, higher humidity, the range is actually larger. So it's the range amount is larger most of the time when I've noticed this, when it is hotter, when it's more humid, whereas the range for fluid tends to be on that, the range, like the closeness of that range is lower for like not as hot, not as humid sort of runs. Does that answer your question, Ryan? I don't even know if that answered your question there. Yeah. Okay.
I
Yes.
just raised my hand, but I'm just jumping in. So do you think, since there's two tests, and I know some of us have already done one, some of us have one that kind of, didn't work optimally.
Didn't work. I know.
But if there isn't a chance to do a second test, should we look at like our stats, like our weather stats during that first test, and then almost do like the opposite as much as possible within summer? Of course, like if we're in a cooler, less humid day, should we do a hotter, more humid day? And then we can see more of an accurate depiction of our range without going to these more, high level, expensive tests.
Well, what you could do is you could do something that's different from a temperature standpoint and weather standpoint, or you could choose a different type of run. So maybe you did it on an easy run that wasn't really long, or then you do the other one on like a high quality session, a speed run or a long run, to see how it differs for the actual activity too. Because that also too could be where your heart rate gets a little bit higher when you're doing a workout. So you could lose, because we know that high heart rate rises, you're going to maybe sweat a little bit more, could be slightly different. So I would recommend that second test, if you have that available, to do it for either the temperature or a different type of type of run. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, it seems like you've done this test like multiple times. Have you correlated the results with like the weighing and just like the basic thing and just like getting a sense for like how much you trust this thing?
Yeah, so I have for the fluid amount, yes. So that's the only thing, is you can't really
obviously you can't do
correlate
the
it to the
but
salt, but the fluid amount,
totally.
yes, is very close when doing your own like weighing of yourself and kind of figuring that out. It's very close. Yep. And I've sometimes had some of my athletes too who were worried more about their fluid losses. And once we figure out their concentration of sodium, and like instead of buying multiples of these tests and kind of keep getting them, or even the NICS biosensor, but besides having to do that all the time, just doing that basic weigh yourself before, weigh yourself after, how much fluid did you lose? Okay, that's your rehydration strategy for afterwards. So it's
because it seems like if the concentration of salt is not going to change, then eventually you want to get a sense for how much water you lose in different conditions.
Exactly. And if you're like a triathlete, or you like to do like bike riding or different types of sports, obviously swimming, a little harder to have the patch on in the water. But if you're doing other sports, sometimes using the second patch on like another type of activity too, if you're a multi-sport athlete.
That sounds good. Yeah. We have about 3 or 4 more minutes. Does anyone else have a follow-up question that they want to ask? even if it's something outside of the test itself. Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, just not directly related to the test stuff, but I feel like one situation that I've struggled with a couple of times, and it doesn't happen often enough to maybe necessarily know that it's a major problem, but it's kind of like the combination of heat and altitude. I feel like I've had a couple of instances where, like, at the very highest point of a high altitude race on a hot day, like, struggled, but I think like 2 data points on that. I'm just kind of curious if you think that there would be maybe any sort of nonlinear thing going on, interaction between those two.
Definitely. So higher altitude, you lose more sweat. You sweat a lot more. Your hydration needs increase when you're at a higher altitude. So if you're someone who trains at a lower altitude and you have a race potentially at a higher altitude, what you've been hydrating with, your daily hydration, you need to increase that for leading into that race, because you are going to automatically elevation, take all of this data point out of it. Elevation increases your hydration needs about 5%. That's what we usually kind of say is like, okay, whatever you're doing, increase it about 5% from a fluid amount. Concentration of sodium will generally be about the same, so you don't really need to shift that too much, but your amount of fluids that you could be losing, that will change. So also on that note, because that is a great question or a great comment question, Ryan, if you are somebody who travels a lot by plane, and that is something that like maybe your job requires it or whatnot, you're also at higher risk of dehydration. Not just from altitude, but like you are going to, it's automatically traveling airplane, even if it's short trips, is going to dehydrate you as well. And especially if you're going to different altitudes. So increasing your hydration, daily hydration becomes even more important too if you are someone who flies frequently.
Just to follow up, Ryan, sorry, I'm going to ask this question for you. But so if Ryan's at a moderate level of altitude, just daily training and stuff is going to require that 5% probably. And then he's, I don't know, say going to run a sky race, right? Like really high level or high altitude output. Would he increase it more, or how would that change? Or is there a level of elevation / altitude that creates an environment that he would need to consider changing even more?
Yeah, just as an example in terms of the actual numbers, like we live at 6,000 feet, but then we've done a few races at like 9,000 to 11,000 feet. So,
yeah, great question. And what I would say is that you would want to increase it by, I wouldn't say 5%, but I would say increasing it by like 2-3%. What I can do is I can actually find like an elevation chart with hydration needs and send that over to you, Asher, and you can share that with the rest of the group, because I think that would be really helpful, because it sounds like that not only you, Ryan, but maybe it's for some other athletes too that could benefit from kind of seeing that hydration need with changes in elevation, especially with like races based off of where they live. So I can find something that looks like that and send that over to you guys. Awesome. I think we had another question. Yeah.
Yeah, one more.